Hi, my name is Matt and today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 7. The iPhone 7 was released in 2016 and was a rather controversial iPhone on launch. This was the first ever iPhone where Apple had the courage to remove the headphone port. The iPhone 7 can be picked up on eBay for between £110 and £170, which raises the questions, how does the iPhone 7 hold up in 2021 and is it worth buying? So the short answer to these questions, the iPhone 7 holds up fantastically in 2021 and definitely doesn't feel like a phone coming up to 6 years old. However, my personal suggestion would be to spend another £40 or £50 to buy the iPhone 8, as I think it'll be worth it in the long run as you'll receive more software support. But let's say that you don't want to spend the cash on an iPhone 8. The iPhone 7 holds up really fantastically and I do think it's a great buy in 2021, especially if you can pick it up for around £110. So within this video I'm going to give you a quick overview of how the iPhone 7 holds up in 2021 and allow you to make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to go ahead and buy one. So starting with design, this iPhone has an extremely familiar design. On the front of the iPhone you will find a 4.7-inch display with a 326 pixels per inch screen resolution. This is the same screen resolution as the iPhone 11 or the iPhone SE2, so it really does just hold up great in 2021. There are two large bezels on the phone at the top and the bottom, which I do think look a little bit outdated now, but this is still the design that Apple sells with the new SE, so it doesn't look really old. This was the first iPhone to actually change the home button, so instead of being a physical button that you press, this is just a flat sheet of glass that uses the haptic engine to imitate pressing the home button. This is actually really good for longevity because the home button was always one of the first parts to break on old iPhones. The back of this phone has an aluminium back, which does mean no wireless charging, but I don't think that's really an issue as I never use wireless charging anyway. You can also see that there are antenna bands that run around the top and the bottom of this phone. The bottom of this iPhone is where it gets a little bit more controversial, as this is where the headphone port should be, but it has been removed. But the benefit of the removal of the headphone port is water resistance. This was the first iPhone to be rated IP67 water resistant, meaning that it can be submerged to 1 meter of depth for up to 1 hour. However, I wouldn't actually advise that you submerge an older iPhone. The reason I say this is because it may have had parts replaced by the previous owner, and the repairman may have cut corners and not replaced the waterproof seals. Obviously, this is only if you've bought an iPhone with a new display or battery, but you may not know if these parts have been replaced. So moving on to performance, I think the most important topic to cover here is software support. This is the reason why I would recommend the 8 over the 7, as it is likely to receive longer software updates. So this iPhone is powered by the Apple A10 chip and 2GB of RAM, and at the moment this runs any application on the App Store perfectly well. So I'm going to quickly explain to you why I think the A10 chip and the iPhone 7 is going to receive at least 2 or 3 more years worth of software support. So the iPad 7th generation and the iPod Touch 7th generation were both released in 2019, and these devices are powered by the A10 chip, and you're still actually able to buy these products directly from Apple. I don't believe that Apple will be selling a product on their store that they plan on discontinuing software support in the near future. Of course, this is speculation, but I would say this is pretty good reason to sort of expect at least 2 or 3 more years of software support despite the existing age of the iPhone. When you're using this phone, it performs fantastically. So I've played games on this phone and it runs really well. It can get a little bit hot, but I don't think that's a problem at all. I was even able to get a winner chicken dinner on PUBG using this phone. App loading time, especially for bigger apps, is a little bit longer than newer phones, and it may become a little bit of a problem, but I really don't think that the app loading time is gonna bother you at all. So as expected, this phone isn't as great as like an iPhone 12, obviously because it's a lot older, but for a phone that's £110, this phone still supports any application on the App Store and will work very well. So finally, on performance, longevity may not be fantastic, and that's because of the fact that it is running on an older chip, and that is why I would recommend getting an iPhone 8 over the 7. However, as I discussed earlier, I do think that this will still receive 2 or 3 years worth of software support. The iPhone 7 has a 12 megapixel rear camera that holds up great. I had an iPhone 7 for several years and always look back at old photos taken on it, and I never think that there are any issues with the camera quality. I think the key takeaway with the camera is that it's not going to be as good as new iPhones, but it does remain very capable at taking photos. In good lighting, this phone can take some really great photos. In challenging lighting situations, the camera does start to show its age. For example, the sky can look blown out on bright days, and low light shots definitely don't look as good as a newer iPhone. This camera is also capable of shooting 4K video, which holds up great today. It can be a little bit shaky and isn't as good as the new iPhones, but it definitely does look very watchable. The video camera is even capable of shooting slow motion video at 720p. I never personally find myself using this feature, a little bit gimmicky for me, but it's a good option to have. The front-facing camera is a 7 megapixel camera, and it was the first iPhone to introduce 1080p selfie recording. The selfies are somewhat sharp. Again, they don't provide as much detail as a new iPhone. For example, if you look at this photo, you can't see each individual hair on my head like you can compared to an iPhone 12, but I do think it's definitely decent enough for things like FaceTime. And again, the video quality on the front-facing camera looks pretty decent. Right, so I am testing out the front-facing camera on the iPhone 7, and I do think this is a pretty decent camera and holds up well. Even for things like vlogging, I think that the iPhone 7 is capable of doing this. It can be a little bit shaky if you're like me and you've got shaky hands, but if you've got it on a gimbal or you've just got it against the wall, I think that this will be plenty decent enough at recording video. So moving on to battery life. Like all batteries, iPhone batteries deteriorate as they get older, and the battery life will decline as a result of that. This iPhone 7 that I've got has a decent battery health, and therefore the battery life easily will last me a day. If you're picking up a used iPhone 7, I would really recommend swapping out the battery for a new one, or even buying one of the Apple charging cases. You can pick up a used charging case on eBay for really cheap now, and it definitely will provide you with a lot longer battery life. So in conclusion, the iPhone 7 was such a massive step up from the 6S. It may not look like it at first because the design is so similar, but this was the first iPhone to introduce full HD video recording on the selfie camera, remove the headphone jack, and also change the home button from a physical button to just a flat sheet of glass. And because of all of these changes, the iPhone definitely does hold up well. The removal of the headphone port means that it's slightly more water and dust resistant, whilst the removal of the home button is good news because it means less moving parts to break in the near future. So I do reiterate that I do think buying an iPhone 8 is a better buy for not too much more money, but if you don't want to spend the extra cash, I also would say that the iPhone 7 is a fantastic buy in 2021. I don't think that software support will be too much of an issue because you can still buy products with the A10 chip directly from the Apple website. So I would say you've got at least 2 years more software support. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please do subscribe. I will be reviewing an iPhone 8 in the next video. So if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button and that'll be out in the coming weeks. I also recently uploaded a video where I kind of just give you some general advice when buying used iPhones to reduce the likelihood of you being scammed. So again, if you're interested in that, you can find that in the description or on the end screen and the cards that come up in a second. Thank you for watching. See you again.